So Dan, how old were you, do you think, when you started coming to the hall?
I was probably 4 years old, maybe a little bit younger. I'm not sure it was legal for my mom to drop me off, but she was desperate because I was a troublesome child.
Troublesome child. Did you cause trouble here for the staff?
Undoubtedly, at least at one point, I put turtles and crayfish in together, and the turtles ate the crayfish. Fortunately, there was a ready supply of more crayfish outside at the pond, which I didn't know at the time, but soon discovered. And boy, it was fantastic. One of my best memories as a kid was taking a cane pole with a bit of yarn stuck to it and a clip at the end, like a clothesline clip. You put a piece of fatback bacon on that, stick it in the pond, and it was like magic. When you pulled it up, there were crayfish attached. That's magic. That is the hall magic, really, for me as a child.
And those were in the good old days when we could afford fatback bacon. Nowadays, we have to use bologna or American cheese.
Fortunately, though, the crayfish are also suffering from the recession, and they are willing to take just about anything you'll put down there, I believe. Isn't that true?
That's true. Yeah. Do you remember any collecting any insects here around the hall?
Well, technically speaking, most of this area was preserved, so I'm not going to admit to having collected anything technically at the hall. We did, however, release a tiny tree frog when I was a child here at the Lawrence Hall of Science, and that was a fantastic experience, letting it go across the pond over there. And it turns out later that they really don't like to swim, so we sort of tortured the little guy after growing him up as a tadpole. But it was a fantastic experience, sort of like Born Free, except with frogs. Have you not seen Born Free?
It's been about 40 years since I've...
Born Free is about rearing a lion cub in Africa and releasing it, and I think it's a movie that anybody who cares about wildlife should consider. But back to the Lawrence Hall of Science, really.
Yeah, the lions we've released here around Lawrence Hall of Science have been native mountain lions, or pumas, and they tend to prey on the deer. We discourage them actively from predation on the children and visitors to the museum.
And that's been successful so far. I think there are no reported casualties. Isn't that true?
That's true. Some of the cars in the Vista lot have suffered damage from...
But they had left bologna in their cars beforehand, which is not a good idea. Right.
Let's talk about summer camp.
Summer camp was a fantastic experience at the Lawrence Hall of Science because it taught me truly that you can combine hard, serious science with fun. And that's something that most kids never really get a sense of otherwise. And I certainly hadn't had a sense of before that. I mean, you can goof around a little bit, but when you're teaching summer camp with people like Tim and the other folks I taught it with, it was just fantastic. We'd go out there and do serious science, show the kids ecology, show them different kinds of insects and plants and how food webs work, and then really get silly with them and show them that you can do that and have a great time. And I mentioned that earlier when I was talking, but I truly mean it. It was inspirational. I still try to do that when I take kids, and by kids now I mean graduate students, into the field and show them that we can have fun, we can be a little goofy. And I learned how to do that here, and I hope that it teaches them that science isn't just this dark, serious thing by, balding scientists in lab coats trying to create new life forms.
I remember a science camp with Dan. We were backpacking through the Trinity Alps, and we were ready to go on the hike, and all the kids were ready to go, but Dan was off with a little jar, and he was unscrewing the lid and waiting. And we said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I've got pheromones in this jar to call in male moths." And we're like, "Yeah, right, Dan."
He did not believe in magic.
And sure enough, within 60 seconds, moths started to descend out of the sky, out of nowhere. We were in like a rocky hill, scree slope, and these moths started coming in. Dan was collecting them. It was amazing, and the kids were pretty impressed.
Yeah. Little did they know that I'd been working on that kind of research for several years as part of my graduate study, so I wasn't nearly as surprised as they were. But I can see how that kind of science can look a little bit like magic. And in fact, that's the way I think it should look, is exciting as it really is, because that was fantastic to me. Even though I'd done it 100 times before, it was still fun and a little bit magical.
And that they could see what a pheromone did. They didn't have to read about it. They didn't just have to hear about it. They could see it actually working.
And what that is exactly is that insects will produce special chemicals that they release in minute quantities out into the environment, and the opposite sex, typically the males, will pick up on that and follow it in like an invisible stream of air, a scent going through the current, and follow their way to what they think is a female, although for those unfortunate moths, it was me.
Turned out to be Dan.
And a certain doom. But for science, which makes it all right, I think. anyway, that kind of thing was really part of my Lawrence Hall Science experience. And that started, I guess, at 4 or 5 years old and went all the way until now. I still emulate and repeat some of the behaviors that I learned as a Lawrence Hall Science devotee. And wow, what a fantastic place to do that. I hope that there can be more people like this.
And we're done.
Was that good?
That's good.